Hi, salam and peace, everyone. This is your podcast, quote unquote, Black Woman Speaks Arabic. This month, I'm going to be going about the topic very differently, and I'm going to be talking about a matter that is not related directly to Arabic, but since we are in the month of festivity, the month of Black History Month, I'm going to be talking about an issue that sprang to mind, and that is a statement that I find myself, as well as other women from the African diaspora, who experience a statement, and that is commonly come across in a way that is as follows.
I don't see colour.
And I set myself on a journey to navigate how I feel about it. Is it a compliment or is it actually something offensive? And I have two guests with me as I explore also another aspect of safe spaces and creating those safe spaces, and how Black History Month allows us to create safe spaces for ourselves. And on the other hand, how inclusive is the Black History Month when it comes to creating those safe spaces and celebrating and embracing our African identity that for the rest of the year, somehow, we don't seem to have the courage to do so. So my first guest, I'm going to let her introduce herself. I'll give you a hint, and she is an author and a publisher, but I'll let her tell you the rest. Go ahead. You might need to unmute yourself.
Oh, I thought I had. Sorry. Hello. Hi, thanks for having me on your show. So my name is Daniela Bleckner. I'm an author, book journey mentor, founder of a company called Conscious Dreams Publishing, and we transform diverse writers into successful published authors.
Wow, in one breath. Amazing. Okay, so what? How did your journey start, and what inspired and motivated you to set foot on that journey?
Well, I've always wanted to be an author from age 4. I remember being asked what I want to do, and it is always, I'm going to be an author. I love that thing about, being young. You don't have these limitations or conditions placed upon you or self-doubt. You just can be whatever you want to be. But as I grew up, I realised there was an absence of my image, and that absence of my image made me start to think that maybe my story doesn't matter and people who look like me don't matter. I published my first book in 2014, and I hadn't initially, set out my own publishing company. I was trying to go about it the traditional route. Faced a lot of rejection. The journey was really difficult. Got a lot of no's, and whilst I was waiting for responses, I stopped writing, and I was waiting until one day I kind of woke up and I thought, hold on. I'm not waiting for a response. I'm waiting for validation. Like someone to tell me my story matters, my journey matters. You're an amazing writer. So I decided that I was going to publish myself. So I researched self-publishing intensely. I had lots of people after that point, after my book started doing quite well. I had lots of people asking me, how did you do that? Can you help me? They'd either come from a traditional background and were finding that their stories were being diluted or watered down, or they were being asked to suit more of a single narrative rather than tell their stories authentically, or they just weren't getting their foot in the door at all. So I started helping people as a labour of love and realised, hold on a second, I should set there's a real platform that could be created here. So I set Conscious Dreams Publishing up officially in 2016.
Wow, I'm taken aback. I never thought that a journey on your way to writing your own book could involve that. Actually, no, you have to dismiss a part of your story, the story that you're fighting to get out there into the world. All right, so I have a second guest, and she is also my sister, but we come from different backgrounds. We share the same father, but a different mother. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Hey, my name's Zibiah Zoe. I'm an actor / creative, so I also do anything that's creative: roller skate, model, hand model, immersive events, corporate stuff, anything that I can get my hands on that I'm interested in, I'm involved. Hello, and thanks for having me.
Bless. I'm glad that you're both here. It's a pleasure. And how did you get into acting, and what was your fire that got you say, yeah, I'm going to be an actress?
I was never that academic in school, and acting was something that always sort of set a fire in me. Nothing else kind of felt the same as acting. I sort of went from school to college to do graphic design, and I liked that, but I was also too hyper to sit behind a screen all day, and I realised that, and I was like, this can't be a job for me because I can't sit behind a screen for the rest of my life. I need to be active and be doing wild things. So then I went to drama after that. Went and did drama at college after that, and realised that how much I really enjoyed it and how much it set me on fire. And I just realised that was my passion. There's people that are good at things without any sort of not learning, but they're naturally good at things, and drama was something that I was naturally good at. Not the writing side, but the active side and the actual acting.
You found your spark.
Yeah, it was something that I didn't have to put too much effort into, if that made sense, to actually achieve what the brief said.
Yeah. So you can resonate with what Daniela is saying then, in terms of finding your passion, finding what works for you, really, finding your flow.
Yeah, exactly. And I just can't see myself in a 9 to 5. I just no, it's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, same here. Hands up. But sitting at the desk though, behind the desk at school, sitting down, and sitting still, is that actually like really natural? Aren't children supposed to be playful? And what do you think? What do you think, Daniela?
Interesting, because I'm actually a teacher as well, a former teacher.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah, I've been teaching today. So I mean, it's a very interesting question. I could talk a lot about it. When I went to school, I loved learning, but I was very hyper. I think the idea that we expect young people to sit at a table, especially if it's a lesson that's 100 minutes. Some schools have lessons that are 100 minutes. As a teacher,
crazy.
I can't sit for 100 minutes, especially if you're working a subject that you have no interest in, or you can find completely baffling. So I really feel it for our young people sometimes. But I think with everything there's balance. If you have good teachers, it's about varying up the lessons, making it interesting, engaging, so it's pupil-led. They feel engaged and involved, and keeping the lesson pacey. Certainly when I went to school anyway, back in the 80s, it was very much chalk, blackboard, sitting at a desk. Bored, wasn't interested unless it was a subject I was interested in, and I would always find ways to mess around and distract other people. I loved it. I loved school for that. You couldn't get away with that stuff at home, trust me. But I was never naughty. So teaching is something that was never in my remit, and never ever thought that's something that I would do. But because of how I was as a kid, I think the best way you can make change is by going within. There's a lot of creative and interesting and engaging teachers out there that don't go by this methodology of sitting still, doing what I say every second of the moment, working in silence, copying down, repetition. There's so many ways to educate and teach our young people,
Oh yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. There's actually a phenomenon going out there, kind of like an alternative methodology. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but there's actually a wave of a new movement of teaching out there. I mean, of course, there's also alternative means of education, but I mean, in terms of using the national curriculum, there's definitely a wave out there. So it's lovely to see that passionate teachers, especially, they want to actually be able to illuminate that and infect the children with their passion, but it's somewhat suppressed by the national the methods and the traditional methods. Okay, so talking about background, so my background, I identify rather as, well, I would pretty much say that the label that is tagged on me is a TCK, which is a third culture kid. And that is because I'm a Brit, number one. Number two, I was taken abroad with my parent or guardian into Arabic-speaking country. And then the third cultural exposure is that I have an Afro-Caribbean background. So how do you identify yourself, Danielle, especially with the forms on a day-to-day basis? You have to like tick them, like what's your ethnic background? Like what do you put?
Interestingly, growing up in the 80s, for me, there was no box to tick. And I have a film background as well, so I wanted to make a documentary called What Box Do I Tick? Because it was Black, Asian, other. And I'm not other. How insulting. So my mother is from Jamaica. She moved here when she was about 5. And my dad passed away 2 years ago. He born in the UK, but descendant of Polish Jews. So yeah, I have a wide, and then you look at my mum's side. She came from a very strict Christian background, and they found each other, fell in love, and here we are.
Here we are. What about you, Zibiah? How do you identify yourself?
I identify myself very much as mixed race. Yeah, I've always seen myself as not fully black, not fully white. I've never really identified as anything else, if I'm honest, because both races have very much made me known that I'm part of the other race, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, me as a TCK, so-called, I mean, I identify very much with anything that's Middle Eastern. I identify with Afro-Caribbean, so I feel at home there. I feel at home there, and I also feel at home here in the UK. So what you're saying is, it makes so much sense. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's an interesting one because I sort of gave you my heritage and background, but in terms of a label, mixed heritage, mixed race, I do identify as black as well. I don't have, do you know what I mean, a specific label that I give myself, and I hate it when people try and give you a label as well. So, Anglo-Caribbean. There's so much, it's so much broader than that. We're made up of so many different aspects. So that's why I always come from a culture perspective first. Like
love that one. I love that one. Yeah. I love to echo that one. I hate the labels, and I hate when people try to put labels on me as well. Okay, so right. Okay. So, talking about how we relate to ourselves in terms of identity, how did you guys feel when the Black Panther came out and the Woman King?
I thought it was empowering. I really enjoyed watching Black Panther, actually. It's the first time I'm seeing an all-black cast in that kind of respect, in terms of it not being about, the black struggle or slavery, or I can't be doing those films. It just felt, you had this imaginary land and everything was opulent, and you had culture and all of that. So I thought that was fantastic. The Woman King I haven't seen. I really did want to see it. I still do want to see it, especially the fact that it's a black African woman who is the lead part. When my partner saw the trailer for it the other day, I was like, where's the actors? Do they actually have any African actors and actresses in there? That is something that I would also like to know. And I know there's been some kind of controversy about the tribe that it's based on. I haven't looked too much into it, but I know there's black people also boycotting it as well, because I think the tribe are also part of selling slaves during slavery as well. I don't know the whole story, but I always think it's empowering, though. But Black Panther, certainly.
And you, Zibiah?
Just touch on that. I think it's great to see a black film in a new light with heroes and about goodness, basically, and not the struggles. And that's refreshing to see that it's positive and it's out there, because it's not been out there. So it's nice to know that there is all these black films coming out, and they're not stereotypical and just what has previously been shown for black roles.
So, Daniela, you mentioned about how when you was growing up, you didn't see much representation of people who look like you in the books you read. What about you, Zibiah, in the industry that you're exposed to often a time? How do you feel your representation is within that industry?
Yeah, completely. So going back to the Black Panther thing, it's like growing up, you didn't have black superhero movies like that in such big, being presented on such big scales with such big production teams and such wide ranges. So it's good to see, because growing up, there wasn't very many characters that looked like you in things, or they didn't have a big part, or they didn't add substance into your life, if that makes sense. It was sort of a throwaway part. And even with the new Little Mermaid and things like that, I think it's really good for the younger generation just to see that and to know that it's possible, and that black people aren't just presented in this one way and stereotypical.
Okay, so that's interesting because you're identifying with the black identity, but what about mixed race identity?
So that's the same. When I say that, I mean in the sense of, I would say most white people see mixed race people as being black because the first thing they see is the colour of the skin, and it's darker than theirs. Yeah. So when I say that, I do identify completely as mixed race, but as society, I believe I'm seen as black, and I don't have a problem with that. I don't personally identify as being fully black because I'm not, and that's how I personally identify. But it doesn't mean that the world doesn't see me as black or put me under that spectrum. But then I feel like in this day and age, the spectrum of being black is very, very wide and broad. So it's like, who's to say who is black and who's not? And like in my head, or how I see things, every single person has a different spectrum on how black you are or how white you are, regardless of your skin color. So for me, it's sort of the fact that I am mixed race and I identify as mixed race, but I know most of society sees me as being black. So I know in a casting, maybe they might write mixed race, but also I know if they write black, they might mean mixed race, if that makes sense.
Thank you for shedding light on that. Okay, so speaking of colour and how people, the first thing they see is the colour of our skins. So I was navigating through a statement that I find that me personally, I've experienced it once. I don't know if I experienced it more than once in kind of like in a subtle manner, but it comes about as follows, which is I don't see colour. And sometimes I get that there's a positive, but other times I feel there's a negative connotation that is attributed to it. So I set myself to ask two different groups of women what their opinion is. Do they feel like it's a compliment or an offense? And I'd like you to just give me your commentary on what you think about their responses. So the first one, I'm reading the wrong thing here. Okay, here we go. So if you don't see the color of my skin, then you don't see me. You only see me what you want me to be. Anyone who's free to comment, go ahead and comment.
I get their comment, and I believe that it's like what I was sort of saying before, is like I feel like I'm mixed race, but what they're saying is I'm not going to buy into the fact that society may see me as black as well, and it's sort of someone else's opinion on top of yours, if that makes sense. And I feel like that person's sort of saying, who are you to judge me on what you believe I am, when this is how I feel I exist as this person, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. I never looked at it like that. Okay, what do you think, Daniela?
I think when people say things like, I don't see colour, I mean, let's link it back to culture and heritage. We're so much more than colour. It's culture, heritage, identity, race. All of those things are, entwined with each other. So when you say things like, I don't see colour, I don't see any difference between you and me, why wouldn't you want to see that difference? But because by default, saying that is almost saying that they don't want to recognize or see you as different. Why shouldn't we celebrate our differences and acknowledge our uniqueness? I'll give you an example as well. I'm running an event called Black Authors on the Rise. And whilst most people are supportive, I had somebody come onto one of my statuses and say, as a white lady, I don't see why this is needed. I can't remember the exact words, but it was like, this isn't necessary. You're creating a problem where there isn't one, that doesn't exist. I don't see colour. Well, you're then privileged to be able to not see colour, to be able to dismiss this. But looking at statistics, only 7%, and it was 1%, only 7% of children's main characters in children's books are characters that are, I hate the term BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, because it basically means non-white, but 7% of main characters in children's books are people of colour. Now, that's not acceptable. So we have to acknowledge it, we have to see it, and we have to represent the society fairly and be able to walk around and say, I don't see colour, means that you don't acknowledge the wealth and diversity of people that are in this society, and also the need for positive representation.
All right, so let me jump onto another one. It's quite lengthy. I would not take that statement as a compliment. It's nothing to be complimented about. If someone doesn't see my colour, then they are also choosing to not see the hardship Black people have endured for centuries. And currently, I feel like that message doesn't help the colorism, because then people can make ignorant statements and then follow up with, I don't see colour, to justify their opinion. Skin colour to me is a part of your identity. I cannot describe you without stating your skin color. What you experience in life also forms who you are. So where do you think this person is coming from? Anyone's free to comment.
Well, I totally agree with what they're saying, 100%. It's again, it's part of your identity. So why would you ignore a part of somebody's identity? I guess that's my response.
Yeah, I definitely get what Daniel's saying, but I also think there's two sides to it, and I get that it is 100% part of your identity, and sometimes by saying someone's race changes the whole story. Like, it outlines everything. By describing a story and saying someone's race, you could understand the story a lot clearer than if you didn't say their race, and it does change the identity and your image you've got of whoever or whatever's going on in that story. But I also believe that, I don't know, I'm very two-minded on it, because one side, yes, you are taking away someone's identity and hardships and certain things of someone's culture, but then it depends how you're taking the comment and how it's said to you. What it's meant, basically.
I think context is important in how it's said and what it's in response to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, similarly, you could say, but when people say, often it does, most of the time it comes from an innocent place of, I don't see a difference between you and me. I don't discriminate against you. You know what I mean? They come from that perspective. 100%. I agree. We're all human. We're all souls first.
Yeah.
But some people say it because it's uncomfortable for them to acknowledge the differences, and that,
then that's when it becomes wrong. So
100%.
Definitely.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. I do find often a time that it does come from a place of good intentions, but also, on either side, I think there's like a lack of knowledge of the impact or the manner in which they might be conveying it. Okay, so I've got one last one. Here it goes, and it's very short and sweet. It's insulting, and I agree with Jane Elliott. So Jane Elliott, she's a philanthropist, and she's saying that if you say that you don't see color, then you're basically dismissing their heritage.
100% agree with Jane Elliott.
Right. Okay. What do you think, Zibiah?
Yeah. I mean, again, I feel like I have got the same opinion. It's sort of the same thing. If they're coming from a good intention place, then I don't feel like it's an offence. But if you're not, or you're just plain being ignorant, or you feel uncomfortable to address any of that situation, then it's offensive. It's offensive on so many different levels.
Okay, so these 3 responses, they've taken out from a group of 2 women. So one group was Muslim and the other was non-Muslim. So me identifying as Muslim. And I'm curious to know, this statement I'm about to say, do you think that they were Muslim or non-Muslim? So it's insulting, and I agree with Jane Elliott.
I have no idea. It could be anyone could have said that.
What do you think? Yeah, you agree?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's just I can completely resonate with that, because what I found is that from all the responses that I got is basically it's more or less on the same spectrum. That's what I feel. I don't know about you guys, but that's just my intake. That relative. More or less, they're on the same spectrum, and it just comes to show that, for me, what I see is that our experiences from the African diaspora are more or less on the same spectrum, regardless of what heritage we have, mixed or not, and our cultural identity or religious background. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely feel like. Well, it's hard to say, because anyone could say anything. It doesn't necessarily mean that this person's Muslim or this person's Christian or this person's atheist. Like, it's hard to say it's hard to say.
And that's exactly my point, because you can't tell based on you can't tell from the statements whether the person is from a religious background, non-religious, spiritual, mixed race, white or none. But the reality of the experience is that that they can relate to one another in one shape or form, from based on what history has passed down to us on the experiences of our Black ancestors. So that's the end of today's episode. I really enjoyed talking to you. I know, Zibiah, you've got to go, so I do appreciate you staying the extra few minutes. And if any of the listeners would like to contact Danny or Zibiah, I'm going to leave the contacts below the episode, and that's it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's really insightful. Thanks.